Kumlen Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is Daf Tzadik Aleph, and we began with an argument of Yechon Shlokish. We're actually up to Tzadik on the very bottom line. If you shouted at your animal, or you screamed or yelled at your animal, and you stopped it from eating, it's like you're doing a chasima contra Rabbi Yechon. You didn't aveda contra Shlokish. Shlokish says that making sound is not considered a maisa. Kimusvas of lo have a maisa. Moving your lips, saying words, screaming is not a maisa. Says the question is he wants to prove that actually saying something is a maisa. It says in the Torah, in the very end of this week's parsha, we're going to read about the concept of tmura, which is you take an animal that was consecrated and you say, I want the kedusha of this animal to transfer to the other animal. And the Torah says, well, Yahu utmarasa yeh kaddish. They both animals now are sacred, the original and the new one. And it says, Layam, you shouldn't do it. But if you did it, that's what happens. Now, all you're doing is saying words. So it says here, Loisha Adam. Not that you're permitted to do Tamura, Elohim, hey, but if you did it, it's valid. But the Seifik is Abayim, you'll get 39 lashes. Now, you only get lashes if you did a pula. You will only, so it doesn't prove that words are considered a Maisa, proof to Rabbi Yochanan. That's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan says. Amalei Rish Lakish responds, if you remember, you remember, we're learning about Makkas and other places about there's an argument whether a lav she'ein by Maisa has Malchus in it or not. So Rabbi Yehuda says that a lav, the question is, why don't you get Malchus for your leftover noiser of an animal? The Torah says, you're supposed to eat the carbon in 2 days and 1 night. Left over, you're even a say, but you don't get Malchus. Why don't you get Malchus? Rabbi Yehuda says, why you don't get Malchus? Because it's a lav hanitik laseh. Because the lav is don't leave over. And what do you do? Torah says, what do you do if you have leftover meat? Burn it. Had it not been for that reason, you would get Malchus. But it's a lav shema ma'aseh. He did nothing. He was just passive. You left it there. Prove that Yehuda holds a lav she'ein by Maisa, you get Malchus on it. Hamani, so the author over here is Yehuda. Lav she'ein by Maisa like in the law. That's why you get Malchus for Tamura. Doesn't prove anything. So, but how can you say that? There's another aspect of this halach here, which definitely does not conform with Yehuda's opinion. What's that? Hakol mamidin. Everybody has the ability to go ahead and do this Tamura thing. Echad anoshim, echad anosh makes it male or female. The havin, but we ask Hakol of what else is there? Hakol lasuya yayish. If it's my father's carbon and I go ahead, the child goes ahead and makes a tumura from the father coming after he passed away. So now the animal is chal, that the kedusha does get transferred. And that view is not Rabbi Yehuda's view. Udloike Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree with that. He says, Yoedish ain't on your father's animal, you can't be the one doing smicha or do tmura. So it's not Rabbi Yehuda. What do you tell my says Rabbi Yehuda? Says the Gemara, Hai Tana, you're right, it's not Rabbi Yehuda. It's not chal. It's not chal. No kedusha. Nothing happened. If I walk over here and I say, the kedusha, your animal should move there. Nothing happens. Nothing. That's right. He has to bring the animal as a carbon. That's all. But you cannot take this kedusha of his animal and transfer it and do tomorrow because it's not your animal. You didn't make kedusha in the first place. That's a machlekes, and we'll have it. When we get there. But Haitana Sovla Kavaz not the Yehuda. It's a Tana who agrees with Yehuda when it comes to Lav Shem and Ma'aseh, because the other time hold that as well. Talk about me learn. So if somebody goes ahead and muzzles a parah, I borrow your parah and I muzzle it. Now when you let me the parah, you were hoping that my parah would eat, so you would save yourself all this money from feeding the animal. But I didn't. I muzzled it. So the Braisa here says, in addition to the fact that I got to compensate you, I got to give you feed for your animal because I deny your animal. I also get malchus. Okay, I also get malchus. Says the Gemara, "Achos is a part of a dashban. You thresh it like umishalem, like really get malchus because you chaysim like sachsim shebedisha you navera, and he did a ma'isa. You muzzle the mouth physically, and umishalem you pay the amount that an animal normally eats. Dalet kavin lepara, a part eats more. You give 4 kavin and gimel kavin chamar, and for a donkey you give 3 kavin. Now. Gemara has a question. So we didn't resolve the machlek debeichos lach. Gemara has a question. We have a rule. Whenever there's a harsher punishment for one avera, you give the harsher one and not the more lenient one. So you get, let's say, death. If you burn somebody's house down on Shabbos, you get killed for it. You don't have to pay for the burning down the house. So and if you did the same thing, if you get malchus, you don't pay. So l'chayda, why are you doing both? You're punishing both. Amar Abaye says, well, just like before we said Rabbi Yehuda, Hamani Rabbi Meiri, Rabbi Meir holds that The way the Shreinu explained, he doesn't hold when it comes to common denominator. He agrees when it comes to Misa, you don't get death and penalty, but when it comes to Malchus, you'll get both punishments. You get Malchus, you learn from Aiden Zaymin, you get Malchus, and you get how do we know that Malchus and Mummy you don't get two punishments? Because it says Mishum Kedei Risha, you punish them for their rishas. Mishum Risha Achas Atam Mechayba V'i Atam Mechayba Mishum Kedei Risha. You only get punished for one, unveiled, not for two. But when it Meir doesn't agree when it comes to Malchus. He doesn't learn that pasuk because, and therefore he says that you do get loikin mishalmin. So therefore this brayso of Meir. That's one answer. Rava says, and this is a big controversy in the Rishonim. The Achronim tzos v'shal. Rava says, Esnan also Torah. The Torah asked it like this. You know, if somebody consorts with a harlot and then gives her a gift, and according to the Gemara, the gift had to be there. He gave her an animal, for example, that was in the room. Yeah, but the animal had to be in the room. She cannot then take it to the mizbeach because it's an abomination. You can't use this animal for this. So it says Aslan also Torah. Now, if it was his own mother that did his chayiv misa, and chayiv misa ain't meser mishalim, that means this gift was not a form of payment because you don't do both. And yet we see that what? That you cannot bring in the mizbech. So what does that prove? What does that prove? That's very important. This Gemara. That proves that when we say "Come b'deramine," we'll give you the harsher punishment. It doesn't mean that you're not chayiv the lighter punishment. You're still chayiv the lighter punishment. The bezin does not have the capacity to give you two punishments. Mishumarisha achas atam mechayiv. The bezin can only incriminate you against one crime, but you really still owe the money. So therefore, when he gave his mother this as a gift, it's a form of payment. And payment in lieu of payment, you can't in lieu of other payments, then you can't use that for the mizbech. Now, why does it? Sorry, yeah. What's the problem? There's nothing. There's no connection. No connection. No problem at all. Esnan is only if it's a gift or a payment. Now, why am I saying this is a big controversy? Big machlekes the Rishonim, and Rashi says over here, if you potter or we can't force you to pay. The nafkamina is if you're from a yid, you want to do tshuva, then you want to do it right. You have to pay the money as well. That's number one. Number two, Rashi's chiddush, which others argue, if the victim then goes ahead and grabs whatever you owe them, it's a valid grabbing because you technically owe the money. And why I'm thinking machlekes Rishonim? Because the other Rishonim would say that you are potter completely from the payment. And we try to reconcile the two. So the Mashal comes along and wants to say, not Hebrew Makis, there's a difference between Mesa Mashal and Leica Mashal. That Mesa Mashal, and when it comes to, we say you're going to you burn somebody's house on a Shabbos, you potter, you taka potter. You're completely potter. So there's nothing, there's no payment, nothing, because the Misa covers also the other payment penalty. You're paying with your life. What grade payment is that? But if it's like in a mishalmin, there we'll say that you still owe the money, just we can't, because it's a different pasuk. We cannot incriminate you, but the etzem chayiv. The bezin doesn't have the capacity to give you two penalties for one act, but you're chayiv. That's how the mashal wants to explain. Then there's a tzas simach of ches, the whole alichas. So we go a bit further to explain. Those are the shayim. They said within Misa as well, when do we say it's as if you paid up or you didn't pay up? Because right in this Gemara here, it talks about Misa. Esnan Baal Ima is Misa. And yet it says here that you're still Chayiv. How can the Mashal say what he's saying? I just made a difference between Misa and Loike. When the Gemara right here compares Loike to Misa, it says that Baal Ima, Chayiv Misa, and yet we say that the gift is considered a payment. So they want to say there's a difference when if you actually got killed for it, or if you didn't get killed, like for example, we had in Ksubas of Lamadal, Chayove Misa Shagin. If you did an Aver that deserves Misa, for example, you burned someone's house on a Shabbos, but you did by mistake, or you didn't get killed for it, then. And they said like this: if you got killed, then you paid with your life, you paid. So that gift, if let's say afterwards the gift was given to her, it's not payment at all. This Gemara is talking about that you didn't get killed for it because there were no witnesses, or you weren't warned. In that case, even though technically you're potter, you were let off, but not because as if you paid it. You didn't pay anything. Is there no lots of shemayim? So that's how we bring it, and that's answers the Ksasa's questions on the Mashal. Anyway, sorry, we just like distract. Let's go right to. Okay, too bad. What are you doing? But yeah, actually, we have if the misas to one and we have a thing misa lazeh v'tashlumin lazeh. Rava says that if your death is you stab somebody who's wearing a mink coat, but it's not his mink coat. Somebody else's mink coat. Do we say kamer drabane in this case or not? And then the question is here: the abish is your chiv misa, and is that considered misa lazeh v'tashlumin lazeh? I was just using an example, but that's what the Gemara gives. Okay, I'm gonna probably get another answer. Mishas Mashiach Chayiv, the moment you borrowed an animal, you already have to pay with food. So if you muzzle the mouth, you already had the chiv for the whole day for that food. So it's two separate penalties, nothing to do with each other. There's no common rabbin here. What do you get malchus for only when you muzzle the mouth? Papa said, Papa partially the following question was asked to me by another Papa Barabba, and I resolved it in a way that it's also, but one of them kilchos, one of them takas also, and the chad the lav kilchos, one of them was not. Boy, even asked me, we had this had smicha, we learned this tomorrow. Are you allowed to knead flour with milk, make milchika bread? Well, partially I told me you're not allowed to, unless we learn to make a shini in the way the bread looks different than all other breads. Why kilchos? Time you look, ain't losh and you're not allowed to make milchika bread because people will take bread, looks like bread, and they'll eat with flakes. The im losh call a pasta suda, call a kula suda, and if you didn't eat it, then the tie bread is also even eat it with salt, even nothing else, just bread on its own. Can't. Because you'll get it's very possible you'll do it. Ain't touches the town about. You're not allowed to smear an oven with flesh. The im tosh. Call it goes on anything you bake is also even when you parrot. Actually, ask a town until you actually yasing no until you kasher that you burn it out. And all of the shayim ask what do you have to burn it out for? It's a not letera. In other words, if you clean it out, there's no flesh there. All it is the flavor in the walls, and then the wall goes into the bread. It's not bar, not lehetera, which you're allowed to have them. Dogim sha'olah b'kaira. Remember, a fish went on the plate to bring back memories. How we pass. Anyway, so they all say still it's a hidur. Even though it said kilchasa, the chasa is the first part of the bread. Another question asked me, you now do climb. Are you allowed to create a setting that they'll be climb, they'll breathe together because you'll put them in the same? Yeah. Well, partially I said not allowed to. Now there's a lot here. That's not right. Halacha is not right. And in fact, the only time it's also do climb is if you manually make it happen. Not much more. When it comes to a man and woman, if they're committing adultery, you don't have to remember see the act. If you see the way they behave and they went in the room, they locked the door, they're long enough. That's enough to say this. But the klayim you have to see it. Yeah, until you yourself will make it all happen. That's the Easter of Klein. Does the Gemara? It says the pasuk. If it would have said the pasuk, it said the pasuk behem techel sirba Klein, right? Why say Klein? Just say behem techel sirba. And I mean, no, he's saying I would have thought layechiz adam. Behem. If you wouldn't say the word climb, I would have thought that you're not allowed to take any two animals, even the same species, and bring them together. It's lewd. It's just unbecoming, and that's why it's awesome. I would have thought you're not allowed to hold on to an animal while it's mating with another animal. Push it to the tznius. It's not right. That's how I would have thought. Tamalim climb. That's why it says climb. Which sounds from here that even just holding on the horn of the animal, for example, is already also by climb. You just said that's also by climb only if you make it happen. It sounds from here that even if you didn't make it happen, just holding on the horn, is still also in climb. That even just holding on the horns is forbidden. Not the way we learned before that you have to be machnis, you have to be the one making it happen. Well, I said no. The word achiza actually means not holding on the horn; it means making it happen. And by other things, mutter, but not by climb. But my colleague is why you use an expression because you speak in an elegant language, like grotesque. Rabbi Yehuda says min b'minoi mutter lahach. The question of Nachman. Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to two same species. You're allowed to be the one making it happen. But there's no pictures in my time. But is sorry. He's doing it in order to have to create no more animals, and therefore he's not distracted. Most of the word I'm going to ask a question. It says it's the same question. It says climb. It says climb. Climb would also and what are we talking about? Achiza, which means holding on the horn. And you're telling me you're not even go further. Well, it sounds like only achiza. So we answer the same thing. My achiza hachnasa means physically making it happen. But my achiza lishna ma'alya. using eloquent language. The head of Golus Rechemi asked me a question. You just said before you're not allowed to bring a min b'sheini min l'did. A papa was machmin because you get them together. What about you had three animals there, two of the same species, one isn't? Is there a problem there? The shaila is kivan ikamine bosamina gada. Naturally, the animal will gravitate to its own ilk. Or maybe the chumrah, but papa, is expanded even to such a case. Or partially suda, we asked the loikehil chasam mishra the avda. We're machmer the loikehil not because this is a particular halacha, but rather because mishum precisa davi. Because this is a princess here getting allowing different animals together. You're expanding. You're taking too many leniencies. Next mission. So talking about chesima, let's say a person was only working with his hands. The employee. Remember, we're comparing chaysim lenechsim lesachshim. We're comparing and we compare a poyel to an animal. We learn from each other. Right? Talos from the from each other. So, but now an animal, when they work with the hands and feet, the entire body. What about a person? Or even he's working, he's picking, but he's only picking with his hands, sitting on a chair and picking. I feel a bit safer. He's just carrying, for example. You're allowed to eat. I mean, if you don't even you got to mimic the animal. You got to be kolatz. Only then do you have the right to eat. My time, what's the sort of Tanakama? It says kisave bekerecha become adavid. I don't care what activity you're doing, as long as you're working for him and you're picking and whatever it is you're allowed to. Basically, you don't even actually you got to be complete. In my time, basically, the key show, we're comparing to the show. You have to be all involved. What about what about birds and geese that don't have they don't have hands? Well, they have his feet. Use it for threshing, yeah. And we'll have in Maruchulas, if you decline in between, you had a fish and you had an animal, you joined yeah, exactly, a shark over you're pulling and whatever it is. So here, the question is, they have no hands. Tesis has a discussion of whether the wings are considered the hands of the animal. Either the wings aren't working, or even wings are not really hands. So what happens then? No, you have to be exactly like an animal, or whatever you have available to you, you're using. The bird is using whatever they have. Good question. Now, how practical is it? I don't know. Actually, now, when we say that you're allowed to eat from what you're working, and you're allowed to drink if you're, let's say, producing wine. So what happens? You're starting to tread on the wine, on the grapes, but it hasn't yet turned into real juice yet. Are you allowed to start drinking with the little bit that's started coming out or not? So he said yes. Toiling workers. And then, they used to take the shoes off, whatever, and they used to, tread on the grapes. Actually, as long as they didn't go yet back and forth in north and south and east and west, they didn't go in all directions. And the wine hasn't really started oozing out yet, so it's not apparent. He could only eat the grapes, can't drink the wine yet. But once he already went crisscross all directions, the begas then it's obvious the wine started to come out. Mishnah. If you working on figs, doesn't give you the right to eat right next to it is the grapes. You can only eat from what you're working on. The question is, if you're working on grapes on the right side of the vineyard, can you pluck grapes from the left side of the vineyard, and eat it while eating? It has to be mamish from that vine that you're working with. That we'll see in the Gemara. You're allowed to hold yourself back. You've already had before. You can go wait till you get to the top of the vine, which are the best grapes. You can hold yourself back. You don't have to eat constantly. You can hold yourself back, and even though you're working up an appetite, and you'll eat more for the better quality. When we say you're allowed to eat, it's only while you're working. In other words, if you stop working, you sit down for a break, and you stop picking grapes, that's not allowed to do. It's while you're picking, you take some in your hand and you put it in your mouth. On the other hand, in order to help out the Bible so you can focus and do the work completely and not be distracted all the time, keep it. And you're taking some and you eat, you take them and eat, it's actually, you're not really putting your whole thing into eating. In fact, you're expecting the whole time, which is the better grape, and you're wasting all this time, to help out the owners to benefit as well. They said, let's say you're walking from one part of the vineyard to the other part of the vineyard. It takes a minute to walk there. You're allowed to eat during that walking. And we'll have a discussion about it, whether that's considered walking is considered part of work or not. But we're saying here, als hoshev aveda, you're allowed to instead of eating while you're picking the grapes, you can eat then. You just said don't be shas malacha. The chiddush is, even though it's not shas malacha, you're just walking, and we'll soon see whether that's considered or not. You're allowed to continue to eat grapes then. The same thing is when you're going back from the vat to get more, let's say, while you're walking, you're allowed to eat. And a donkey, while you're dismantling the donkey, what does that mean? We'll see later in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, okay, the same species, but it's not the same vine that I'm working with. Can I eat from them? Not. It's the same species. It has to be what you are putting into the keli. I'm not picking that vine. Tell me you're not allowed to. So that's a question. We said before that we learn how to shoy from a poil. The Torah says while it's threshing, which means it's detached. But then we learn out from a poil, just like a poil is while it's growing, you're picking while it's attached, you're allowed to eat. So and also while it's attached, you're allowed to eat. But tell me, how does it work? The way Rashi learns is he has a wagon in the back. What's the animal do? He has a wagon in the back. You're harvesting and you're putting everything in the back. So what's the animal eating? What's the front? But in the front is not what they're cutting. So how can you do that? Faces and other shayim don't like Rashi because that's Tolush. We're talking about mechuber here. So they're talking about somehow or other the animal turns around and he was behind him. Yeah. So how can he be eating? So they're standing right next to him. It's talking about a cart. They're standing right next to him, let's say, and cutting right in front of him. How can he be eating from what they're cutting right in front of him when whatever's cut is cut already, and whatever he's eating they haven't cut yet? So how can be working with? How can be by a person? He is picking the grapes and is eating as he's doing. By the shoylachayda, he's eating one mechuben while they're cutting another one. They're cutting this and he's eating one on the left. So how's that work? We're talking about very long. Let's say in the Kibbutz Ashland, what they're cutting is a big vine, a very long part of the vine is in front, and part of the vine is in the back. They're cutting the lower part, let's say, and this is from the animal. So it's possible to be the same vine. So it's not a problem. So the question still remains: are you permitted to eat from the same species, even though it's not what you're cutting? Now you're working with. It says in the Mishnah you shouldn't eat grapes. Mashma it would have been the same. The only problem is this was species. It would have been the same. You'd be allowed do me the tainim anovim. It sounds like only because it's tainim anovim. Would have been tainim you're allowed to. So we see, as long as the same species, good enough. If you're telling me that what? That even grapes, if it's the same species, then you cannot eat if it's not the same things. Then how can that be? I'm not sure of eating. Give me a case where grapes are grapes you can eat. You could eat if it's grapes are grape, but not grapes are tiny. You have different vines that sort of mesh together, and you have to pull away this vine, the one on the left, let's say, to get to one on the right, but they're all growing together. That's when we say that if it's grapes are grapes, you don't have to be matzriach all the time. You don't have to bother yourself to push away. In fact, that's taking too much time. You're helping out the balabot, but not doing that. Just take whatever you want as you're working. That's what we're talking about. But if it's ta'enim and anavim, even though they're growing together, they sort of the branches are sort of all mixed up together. They're not really grown together, but the branches all mixed up together. You're not allowed to eat from the what do you call it? The ta'enim. You have to push it away. Okay, so no da'ya one way or another. First we're here. Abu Menez asked me to deny yourself. Actually, begin to my office to the better part, but eat it then. If you're telling me that if you're eating in one grape, you're allowed to eat another one, is nasal v'neisim. If you're telling me that if I'm working with the vine, let's say on the north side, I'm allowed to eat from the vines on the let's say the south side. So what I should do is I should go to the south side and take the grapes and go back to the north side and eat it there. Why Why he has to deny himself and not eat anything until he gets there? Just go there right now, even though you're not working there. You tell me you're allowed to, right? As long as the grapes are grapes. So why have to starve yourself and wait till you get there? Go there, pick whatever grapes you want, and go back and continue your work. Because even though I'm not working there, I'm allowed to. You're right. The problem is not that you're not allowed to eat it. You are allowed to, but you're taking time. But what right do you have to take off time on your cheshbon to eat grapes there? When you get there, you'll eat there. Like a boiler says that wasn't the question. We never had that question if you're allowed to go. Our question was your wife and children are not hired. Can they go and pick grapes from the other vine and bring it to you where you are? You're not allowed to take off work to go get, but can they bring it to you? Mike. Here. So we have now two versions in the Gemara. It says while you're working out in the hush of one help the bailam out while you're walking from one road to the next. You can eat and chew while you're walking. Or they're coming back when I got in the bath to get more. So right now we thought mahalach dami. Mahalach is like you're working, right? You're working. The only reason why you're allowed to eat while you, but right now while you're working, you're not working with you're walking is part of the working, so you're allowed to eat, but you're not working on the vine right now. And yet we say you're allowed to continue eating, even sound like only a takanah chacham you're allowed to eat, not matayda. Why not? While you're working with one geffen, you're not allowed to work with another geffen. And since right now while you're walking, you're not working with any geffen there, so you shouldn't be able to be eating matayda. So somebody's even made clearly that you can only eat while you're picking the grapes, matayda. So you're not allowed to take from another geffen. Must have no raya. I could. The problem is while you're walking, you're not working. And the only reason why you're allowed to eat then is because it comes to Chamim. We're helping the Balbas out because he's not taking off time. He has to walk anyway. Let him be done. That's one version. So first thing about thought that's not like a Maislami. Behind time of the Reisloch, you cannot eat Mishum the Lab goes a Maislami. You're not like doing a Maisa. But if you would be doing a Maisa, then maybe you could eat Matayt even though it's a different grape. That's what we would have thought. Like Moshe says, no. In this version, you're not allowed to eat. But it's like you're working and therefore you're allowed to. And the only reason why you're allowed to is because it's kind of a Hashem Aveda, because you're not working with this geffen. Let's finish. A donkey while dismantling. If you're taking, let's say you're taking off the whole thing, so Rashi says you take off the whole thing in one go. It takes a second. You open up the ropes that you tied it down, and you take the whole suitcase off. So what do you mean? While you're taking off, the donkey can only eat while it's still sitting on the donkey. He can still eat. They're allowed to turn their head around and eat from what's sitting on their back. You're not allowed to take by hand from what's on the back and feed them, but they can turn around the head if they can reach it and eat. So we'll stop over here. I'll see you tomorrow.